met my husband, yes, in 2003, online dating, way before it was cool. So I've been on the pulse of what was happening in the world of dating. I've been 2 steps ahead for a long time. And people used to say to me, no, I would never online date. That's nerdy. That's weird. That's awkward. And look, now it's one of the primary ways that people meet today. So listen up, ladies. I'm talking to you. The texting and dating is the next wave and is really the thing that you need to master to be successful in dating today. So when I met my husband, I had been dating offline unsuccessfully for a while. I always felt like I was someone that I would kind of fall into the friend zone, and I was never the romantic lead in the romance movie. I was the quirky best friend, right? And I really struggled with having my identity in who I could be to a potential romantic partner really come across when I met them out at a bar or wherever my friends were going at the time to meet men. And I discovered online dating, and it was like this treasure trove of all the kind of guys that I really wanted to meet. And it was a great opportunity for me to really celebrate who I was and show and tell the things that were really different about me so that I could attract the person who really was best for me. So once I met my husband online in 2003, I had so many people come to me saying, well, what's this? Hold on a second. What's this online dating thing? Because you got that guy on a dating site. Maybe I should check it out. And I started writing profiles just for friends and family, just for fun. And I soon discovered when people started calling me and saying, I met someone, I'm getting married, I'm having a baby, that there was really something in this secret sauce of authenticity and being able to tell your story and express who you are through this profile that allowed you, with this new medium of online dating, to connect with the person who was the best match for you anywhere in the world, not just in your own backyard. Mm-hmm. So as far as it relates to texting and dating, I have seen over the years that I've been doing this, which now is almost 12 years that I've been coaching singles, I have found that increasingly the questions have become increasingly more focused on communication. And whether it's on texting communication, what do I say to this guy next? I really like him and I want him to ask me out again. Or how do I build this rapport before the date so that when we actually see each other, we have chemistry and we feel connected and there can be something more that grows out of it? How do I repair this situation? I said the wrong thing and now I haven't heard from this guy and I thought things were really headed in a good direction. So I started getting these questions from clients all the time. I started getting emails in the middle of the night, like, what do I say back? And I realized that communication really has shifted to a digital medium. And I used to say, don't even bother with texting. It's the lowest form of communication. But I really had to evolve that over the years and help my clients figure out not just what to say, but how to really build texting into their communication style so that they can build the chemistry with a date. So whether they're frustrated about what to say in the text or they're frustrated that they're feeling disconnected from their date because their date brought their phone and is sitting on the table. Everyone listening, I'm sure, has had that happen. And you feel like they're not paying attention, they're not connected to you. There's a reason for that, and I can tell you about it if you want. There's a study on that. I'll tell you about that later. But basically, it's how do we incorporate texting communication into our dating life and use it to forward our connection with someone as opposed to be something that hinders the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Damona. And I agree with you. I think that communication has evolved and changed, and it's one of the things that I get big questions about as well. You know, how do I respond to this message from an online dating site or app, or how do I respond to this text? Or there are a lot of women that are frustrated because they do feel that disconnect you were talking about. It doesn't feel like the kind of communication that they're used to, particularly women that maybe are a little older and were used to a man actually picking up the phone and calling them up and having a real life conversation before they actually met. And that is not happening in a lot of situations. And there's some resistance to it. And I, like you, I felt some resistance to it, not only in my own life, but in how to advise clients about it because of that disconnect piece. So I guess my question for you now is, why do you think that women should, who may have rejected this whole idea of communication in this way, whether it be texting or messaging, should embrace it now? And then we'll move into some ideas on how they can navigate that more smoothly, more gracefully.
Yeah. Well, I think we're at a time right now where we have a choice. And you can be frustrated about the way your dates are communicating with you, or you can join them. I didn't say beat them, but join them at their own game. And the reason that there's so much frustration around it is because it's new and it's not familiar to us. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. And I've had to embrace that it is a tool. And if it's just like any tool. If you use it properly, it can be really effective. If you're trying to hammer in a nail with a screwdriver, you're going to be really frustrated, right? So you have to have the right tool for the right job. And in dating communication, you need to know when to use texting and when to inspire a man to pick up the phone and call you, and when to just straight up get offline and get into the real world. So in that beginning phase of the relationship, I really do recommend that people use texting sparingly. And this is a big challenge right now for a lot of daters because you feel like it's an easier form of communication when you're in that awkward space of not really knowing someone, maybe somebody that you met offline. And it's a little bit different if it's someone that you've met through a social channel or you've met face-to-face first, and then you give them your number. But first, I just want to talk about if you're moving from an online dating site, which is how obviously I met my husband and how most of my clients really are connecting with someone today. And the biggest mistake that I see people making is staying in the digital world too long. When you're texting someone back and forth or sending messages on the dating site or messaging them on Facebook, you are building an idea in your head of a person that may or may not actually exist. So you're actually setting yourself up for disappointment of that person just not ever being able to match up to the person in your head. Doesn't necessarily mean that the person's not going to be good enough. It just means they're going to be different. And then when you show up, there will be sort of a dissonance between what you were expecting and what you really get. So I like to keep that communication really brief. And I have this saying, I believe that texting is for information and not conversation in the early part of the relationship. So even though it may be awkward to pick up the phone and talk to someone that you've never met before, it's more awkward to send them things over text that you would never say to them if you were face to face, because you develop this false sense of closeness and thinking that you know and understand that person. And you really need those first interactions to take place face to face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what are some of the tips that you can offer for women who are beginning a conversation? I know you're saying keep it informational and not have
conversational. Yeah.
Conversational. But, how does what are your tips for how a woman would move a conversation if they're in a conversation that's going on online or via texting? How does a woman gracefully transition that into something so that she doesn't get stuck in that trap that you're talking about of this ongoing conversation and building this idea or this relationship based on what may be a totally false premise?
Yeah, well, I'll start by calling back our interview on the summit last year.
Mhm.
And we talked about how to date like a feminist. So I'm a big advocate for women taking their dating destiny into their own hands. Now, this doesn't mean becoming aggressive or masculine or changing who you are. This is me trying to empower you guys listening, that you gals listening, I should say. I want to empower you to understand how much choice you actually have in dating. And I know a lot of the women listening are probably feeling like they're frustrated because they feel like there aren't enough options out there. And when they do find someone they like, he falls for someone else, maybe someone younger, maybe someone that you feel is not at your level, right? Mm-hmm. And I would really challenge the women listening to flip that thinking and understand that while men may have more options with online dating, this is actually the best time in history, ever in history, for a woman to be single. You have so much choice at your fingertips, and you have so many different ways that you can make a connection, be it on a dating site or even on Facebook or meeting at a mixer or a speed dating or a game night, a meetup. There are so many ways to connect with someone. And when you make that connection, when you meet in person, and when you find someone that really resonates on your level, the other ones don't matter. and you really owe it to yourself to make it your mission to find that person. And that might mean kissing a lot of frogs. That might mean going on a lot of dates. But I really look at it as a benefit to have the ability to choose the men that you want to devote your time to. Mm-hmm. Did I answer your question, or did I completely go off topic?
I think the question is, how does a woman begin to move a conversation? Because I didn't think you get trapped in a conversation. How does she move that into the real world, into the real life? Yeah.
Now I'm going to actually answer your question, Michelle.
That's okay. I love what you said there.
When you are empowered, you have the control of the conversation. Women have the ability to say no to sex, to say no to dick pics, to say no to whatever it is that you do not want to accept into your life. Now, this doesn't mean that you should be negative and rejecting everything in the dating space. I actually I encourage my clients to adopt an attitude of yes, I call it, and say yes to as many things as possible. But if you know what your deal breakers and your must-haves are, if you know that you don't want to go down the rabbit hole of what I call the texting trap and get stuck in that texting phase, you have the power, you have the ability to shift the conversation. And as you said a moment ago, Michelle, to do it gracefully. So I like to talk about it as inspiring a man to show up for you the way that you want him to show up for you. And a lot of times, like, this is not an ultimatum. This is not a challenge. This is not you demanding something. This is, if he sends you a text and you really would rather just talk to him on the phone, this is you saying, I'd love to tell you about that when we meet, as opposed to typing it all and saying it over text and then wishing you could take it back. Remember, before you hit send, that you have the power to send the conversation and the connection in the direction that you want. And if he doesn't pick up the ball, if he says, oh, no, I really prefer text, he is not respecting your wishes. And that should tell you something. That should tell you maybe that's not the guy that's really going to show up for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's really valuable information to know. And sometimes the sooner we know that, the better. And the word invite, this inviting way of doing it, is a graceful way of finding out if a man is really in a position where he's likely to step up into something more. And sometimes this whole dating thing when it comes to just dating via text, cyber dating, so to speak. We can get caught up in that and create this fantasy that there's this relationship going on where, like you said, Damona, in real life, there's maybe not going to be any connection at all.
Mm-hmm.
And we got caught in the fantasy.
And there's no emoji. There's no, there's nothing that he can type that really can tell you exactly who he is. And people ask me, because I've been online dating since 2001. I had been. I'm not now. But
your husband is relieved to know that, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. But it was very early in the process when I started, and people said, "Don't you meet a lot of weirdos and freaks? And isn't it kind of scary?" And I really look at online dating as a much safer way to meet than some of the other methods that I used to employ, and I'm sure other people did. So I really want to encourage women, if they're not open to online dating, just to try it, just to think of it as a possibility. And I'm sure there's some people listening who say, "Oh, I tried it and it didn't really work." But you really need to try it in a mindful and committed way. You can't go on for eHarmony free weekend for 3 days and expect that Prince Charming is going to appear. It was really, for me, years of being focused on it, taking a break, trying it again, and being strategic about my approach so that I could set myself up for online dating success. But what I want to say about that is it's much harder for someone to scam you, to take advantage of you, to do something, all those terrible stories that we hear about online dating, that we hear because they're so unusual. You don't hear and then she went out with this guy and she kind of liked him, but she kind of didn't, and she wasn't really sure. That's not newsworthy. It's the big stories that we hear that make people so scared. But once you get offline and into the real world, it is a lot harder for that person to take advantage of you, to take your money, to scam you. So I really encourage people to move offline as quickly as possible. I say no more than 3 exchanges online before you move to the next step. And the next step could be a short text communication, a text thread, we call it, or a phone call, a short phone call, 15 minutes. You don't want to wear out your welcome before you get to the date. And then move offline and move into person. But it's these stories that we hear of women that were emailing back and forth with some guy or texting back and forth for months and sometimes years, and they felt that they had a real connection and the guy said everything that she wanted to hear. And then the common denominator of many of those stories is that they never met face to face.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one of the things you mentioned that I want to emphasize is that in these early stages, oftentimes less is more. Mm-hmm. I think there can be a temptation to overshare sometimes as a result of us being online. There's sort of this barrier of anonymity, and we feel like we can just start oversharing, and that can come across in messages online or in text. I've seen some messages, as I'm sure you have, from some of my clients where they write these big, long paragraphs. And I always say, look, you are the prize. You are a woman of high value, and your time and your energy and your attention and your focus should not be given away when someone hasn't earned that place in your life. And yet sometimes it can be easy to be caught up into that trap. So I love that you emphasized don't wear out your welcome on the phone call, and to move things offline as soon as possible, because then you find out whether there's a real connection before you overinvest in something. And for me, Damona, and perhaps you'll agree with this, I believe that one of the keys to being with the right guy is not being tangled up with the wrong guy. And that means even energetically, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, I had that same experience myself, Michelle. When I met my husband, there was a guy that I had been on again, off again, on again, off again, on again, off again for, I believe it was 5 years. Mm-hmm. And in my head, this guy he could have been the one. Like, he was everything on paper, but he just never acted in the way that I really needed a potential husband to act. And he was always just half committed to the relationship. And I really had to draw a firm line. And Michelle, this was the scariest thing I probably ever had to do in relationships. And probably much scarier than anything I've dealt with my husband. But I had to go to that guy and I said, look, I'm on this path. My radio show co-host calls it a reverse ultimatum. Like, I'm looking to meet my husband and I need to be on that path. So either you're on that path with me or you're not. But I'm not asking you to make a commitment or to change who you are or to do something that's going to make you uncomfortable. I just need to do me. And so either you're here or you're there. And he said to me, like, he was there basically. And he would have happily kept it in the back and forth medium space for as long as I allowed that to happen. And I just said, okay, thank you for telling me. And I appreciate that. But now here's what I need. I need you to not call me. I need you to not text me. I need to have some time for me to deal with how I feel about this. And maybe we can be friends in the future, but not right now. And I shut that door. And about 3 months later, I met my husband. But I really, truly believe, Michelle, that if I had been in that back and forth space with that guy and allowed that to continue and allowed him to continue using up my precious time, depleting my romantic resources, I would not have been ready for the guy that I've built a life with, who's really the perfect guy for me. I would have been distracted. I would have overlooked him. I would have played him. I wouldn't have been in the place that I am right now. And I'm so glad that I took that leap of faith and risked rejection so that I could be ready for the one. Mm-hmm. Rejection's God's protection, right?
That's right. And I love that you modeled that conversation for us, Damona, because I too have a similar story where I was in a long-term on-again, off-again relationship. And it wasn't until I had that courage to have a similar conversation and to free myself up from that the space opened up for me to be ready to meet my husband. And I, like you, I'm so grateful that I did that, because I was in a situation too where this man would have been very happy to continue status quo, but it wasn't what I wanted. And so it's important here, and this is one of the reasons why I love what Damona teaches. It's important here to be in touch with what you really want and to recognize that you do have choice and that you can empower yourself in ways that you might not always recognize or see. We don't have to leave this to the hands of fate, so to speak.
Yes.
Right?
Take your dating destiny into your own hands. You really can carve the path that you want in love. And it doesn't matter if you're 50 years old. It doesn't matter if you're 25 years old. It doesn't matter if you're 20 pounds overweight. There is someone who will love you and appreciate you just as you are. And I got inspired to tell another story that a lot of times I hear from women that they will be ready to meet that guy when I lose 10 pounds, when I finish this job assignment, when I get to be this idea of myself that I want to be, but that perfect idea that may never actually be attained, that's when I'll be ready for the relationship. And I just have to say, you are ready for the relationship right now, because you want someone who's going to be with you through all of it. And a lot of times that I'll just wait until I lose 20 pounds, or I'll just wait until I'm done with this project, is just deferring the fear of rejection. If I date right now and I'm 20 pounds overweight, then I will be rejected. And those are the thoughts that we have to eliminate to be able to get to your authentic self and attract someone who loves the authentic you. And if you're deferring, so many of the women that I work with are super successful in their careers. And I love that. And I love working with powerful, driven women. But then in love, they kind of throw up their hands and say, I don't know what to do, but this thing is working really well. My career is working really well. So then they double down on their career. And then the next thing they know, their schedule is booked with time for the thing that they've committed to, their work. And when a man comes into your life, he may not even feel that you have the time and the space for him. So I also really believe in carving out that space before the man even appears. I used to do something. I was working with a coach before I met my husband, and she gave me this great gift of doing artist dates. And she said, I want you to carve out 3 consecutive hours for yourself that you spend getting to know yourself every week. And I was like, 3 hours? I mean, I'm so busy and I have this and this and this and this. She said, you have to carve out that time for you as if it is time that you're spending with another person. Because I gave all this time to my boss and I gave all this time to my friends and my family, but I wasn't giving that time to me. And just by being here, I know the women listening are capable of that. But I just have to emphasize how important it is. And I do this with my clients. I say, carve out dating time. That's time that you're spending on a dating site. That's time that you're going to a mixer. That's time that you're asking friends to set you up with somebody. Carve out that time, because if you wait to make the time until he appears, he may not see the space and he may not walk through that door.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's a distinction here that's really important, that there's resistance comes up for a lot of women when we talk about creating your dating destiny or being intentional, because some women equate that with being out there like, oh, I got to find a man, like a panicky, desperate search. That's not what we're talking about at all. We're talking about creating opportunities for new possibilities for yourself in your life, both online and offline. And today we're specifically focusing more on the online piece. And like Damona says, one of the great things about online is you have the opportunity to be the chooser in many ways, as in terms of who you interact with. You have the opportunity of meeting people that you otherwise might never ever meet in real life. And it can be a really good opportunity to practice a lot of these skills that we're talking about in terms of communication, so that you're more confident not only in the online or the texting area, but when you actually meet someone in person, right?
That's a really good point, Michelle, because I do see a lot of times these things that we were talking about, ignite, inspiring, inviting him to show up for you. I find a lot of women have reticence to do some of these things that we're suggesting in steering the conversation the way they want to steer it, in making suggestions about where to go on a date that would make them feel more comfortable. And a great place to just test that out is in the texting environment. Because if it's something that you should be doing, but you have trouble verbalizing when you're on a date, try starting that process in the texting communication, and try some of these tips of inspiring him by saying, I'm not sure about this place. I've never been to that place, but I hear this place is really nice. If it's a date that you don't necessarily aren't really excited to go on, you should be excited every time you show up to a date. And it's your job, it's your responsibility, ladies, to make sure that you have done everything you can to set your date up for success. So maybe that is going somewhere that's closer to your house. Maybe that's going to a place that you're more familiar with. Maybe it's just meeting at a different time, but just you got to set the boundaries for him and then let him show up for you, inspire him to show up for you. And, another thing that I think texting has impacted everyone's expectation that you're always available. You get a text, and I think the average response time is less than 10 minutes. And if you don't get a text response within an hour, every hour that passes after that, your chances of getting a response exponentially decrease. So the speed of communication is happening like this, and the expectation that people expect that dating happens like this, but chemistry doesn't happen like this. Chemistry and true connection builds over time. So you need to space out those interactions, and don't be so available to him whenever he texts you or feels like seeing you. And you don't have to give him all the information of, oh, well, I can't, I'm here or there or with my friends or my boss or whatever. You just say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not available that night, but I would love to see you. And that's the inspiring part. I would love to see you next week. I'm free on Wednesday. And then he has a choice. He can either say, oh, great, I will switch everything around to be available on Wednesday. Remember, you're the lady, so you do set the rules. Or he can say, I can't do Wednesday. How about Thursday? But then you've at least created this space where it's like, I'm not just available anytime that you contact me. And please do not start a date after 10 o'clock. Like that is not a date with your potential husband. I mean, ladies have other needs and interests. If that's your need and interest, go ahead and start the date at 10 o'clock, but your husband is not going to be there more than likely.
Right. Yeah. And I really appreciate what you said about setting your date up for success. In fact, I was just interviewing a male expert, and one of the things that he said, men, he said, I'm not telling you a secret here. Men are terrible guessers. He said, so don't make us guess. Help us to know what your wants, needs, and preferences might be, because then it creates this win-win opportunity. You get what you want, and he gets to feel like he wins and has the opportunity to please you and to be appreciated by that. But unless we're willing to express our wants, needs, or preferences, or let them know what would work well for us, it's hard to set them up for that success. So yes, I love that you emphasize that in that way.
Yeah, men are pretty literal, and a lot of times. So I host a radio show called Dates and Mates with Damona Hoffman, and my co-host is the CEO of a new app called Textspert, where people post their texting dilemmas and get crowdsourced advice on it. So every week we take in the top Textspert questions, and then we dissect them on air. And so many times we see these texts from women that say, like, I don't know what he means here. And he's basically saying, like, I'm not really that interested in not so certain terms, but he's saying, like, I don't know, I got really busy this week. And she's going, I don't know how to take this. I thought he was really into me, but now he's saying this. Men are pretty literal. Take them at their word. If he says he's really busy, he doesn't suggest another time that he wants to see you, it's just like we were saying earlier. That's the one that's going to suck your energy dry. So you need to shut that door so that you can open the door to possibility and to someone who could be the right one. But don't read into men's texts too much. Usually they're pretty much saying what they mean. And if you're not sure what they mean, like, post it on Textspert or get a friend to look at it who will actually tell you, no, you know what? That guy is just not that into you. Because usually it's pretty clear. We overlay our hopes and our expectations on top of it. And a lot of times it causes us to misread the intention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good tip, Damona. Thank you for sharing that. And I feel like I could talk to you all day. I love talking to you. It's so much fun because you have so much to share. I want to thank you for being here with us and have you give us the opportunity to share some last words or last piece of wisdom.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm just so thrilled to be a part of this. And I do also want to acknowledge all the women here for showing up for themselves and committing this time to put themselves on the path towards love. And I just want to encourage them to keep going and know that there's someone out there for them. And I'm all about authenticity. And when you are you and your best self and your unapologetic self for being who you are, that's when you will attract the person who you're meant to be with. And look, I grew up not fitting into a box anywhere. I was not the classic standard of beauty. And I really felt for a long time that I was overlooked for it. But it was just the moment when I started to say, I'm not going to become someone that I'm not. I'm not going to try to fit in that box to get someone to love me. I'm going to be who I am, and I'm going to let that attract the right person to me. That's when my whole life changed. And I know that's when lives will change for the women listening today. So thanks for being here, everybody. And thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Damona. I appreciate that message. And that's a perfect way to wrap up today. And I appreciate all that you've generously shared. So all of you, please join us for more, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye for now.